Hey guys, Marcelo Nashoza here, back yet again, this time for another video. I've been thinking about starting to talk about this particular series for a very, very long time because it is very near and dear to my heart, and that series is Star Trek. Now, if you're a person who doesn't know what Star Trek is, I will just simply say, where have you been for all your life? Have you been living under a rock? So I won't try and explain what Star Trek is, because I think that those of you who are curious about what Star Trek is all about are good enough to use the Googles to look it up. What I'm going to be talking about today is actually the unaired pilot of Star Trek, the very, very first pilot, the one that got rejected initially by CBS many, many moons ago. And as you may have guessed, the title of the unaired pilot of Star Trek is entitled The Cage, starring Majel Barrett, Roddenberry, and Jeffrey Hunter, both as number one and Christopher Pike, respectively. I thought that this first episode was very, very like Star Trek, but very, very unlike Star Trek. Now, when I say very like Star Trek, sure, you really have the Star Trek DNA from the outset. You have the bridge crew, you have them investigating a strange pulse in space leading to a planet called Talos 4, where reportedly eons ago the ship called Columbia crash landed, and then they lost contact with the specific ship for whatever reason. So the only weird thing that I found when Mr. Spock or any other crew member wanted to show the captain information, the computer of the Enterprise actually printed out physical paper. And I was like, when the series proper starts up, I don't think we ever see paper. Now, granted, I haven't seen the original series from start to finish in a while, so I might be completely wrong on that aspect. But I believe we don't see original paper ever, so I just found it really, really odd. The other thing that I found kind of, well, not funny, I just was like, okay, so you guys are going to stand here and stare at a scream, and you expect the audience to believe that this scream is this stuff, and the only way that you expect the audience to believe what you want them to believe is by telling us this? And I was like, okay, so we're, led to believe that this cosmic energy or the Enterprise is flying through this cosmic energy barrier that will lead to Talos 4. And before any of you say it, I understand the year that this pilot was made, and I understand the constraints of the time. But I was like, couldn't they have found a better way to illustrate this instead of the way that they did? If I wanted to convey that information, I would have had some photos be broadcast on the Enterprise computer to have a physical representation of what the Enterprise was going through in the energy barrier, in the energy barrier leading to Talos 4. That's how I would have done it. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that, to say the least. The other thing that I wasn't a really big fan of is at a point before Captain Pike leaves the bridge, a yeoman comes to give him a standard report. And he barks at her and he says, well, yeoman, didn't I tell you whatever, whatever, whatever? And then he stops and he says, oh, I'm just not used to women being on the bridge. And when he says that, Majel Barrett looks back on him and goes, excuse me, you do realize that I'm a woman. I like this pilot, but I have to understand the time in which it was made and the social norms at the time aren't what I would consider acceptable. Not me, but society. That psychologically in my brain is going to take a while to get used to. The scene that I found quite funny is when Pike called Dr. Boyce, the on-ship doctor, to his room. The on-ship doctor, instead of bringing him like a pill or something, brought him a martini and starts to talk to him about, maybe he's getting overworked, maybe he needs to take a vacation, this and that. And Pike admits straight out, he goes, I'm bored, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I am tired of being responsible for this many lives, and basically I want to get the fuck out of Starfleet. And I'm like, what? You want to get the fuck out of Starfleet? What? How? Why? What Jeffrey Hunter's performance comes off as whiny, uninterested, and bored to death in that he wants a change. But then Dr. Boyce says, okay, so let's say, well, he didn't say this, okay, but he just illustrated this in my opinion, he illustrated this in his lines. He goes, okay, so let's say you retire from Starfleet. What are you going to do every day? Are you going to go out on your horse, have picnics every single day? And then, Pike goes, oh no, I would do other things. Like I would be a trader. I would trade with the Orions and I would do this and that. And he goes, you trade with the Orions? You? Well, he didn't say this. I'm sort of just giving you my interpretation of what he said. But Dr. Boyce was right in assuming that, look, despite the fact that Christopher is unhappy with his job, he's acting like a whiny, mousy boy to me. At the end of the day, I think Christopher Pike's true destiny is to be the captain of a Starfleet ship. And I think that right now, he's just bored and depressed. Or in this episode, he's bored and depressed. So that could explain his behavior up to that point. Anyway, moving forward, when the Enterprise crew goes down to the planet, of course, the much maligned scene of Christopher and Spock walking up to the singing plants and then Spock smiling. That doesn't bother me an ounce because, not to say I don't care about Star Trek canon, but I'm not psychotic about it like other fans may or may not be. So Spock smiling doesn't really affect me doesn't really affect me much, if at all, when we meet the people on the planet who are supposedly from this lost expedition. They're very, very clean, healthy, and very, very happy to see the crew of the Enterprise. But when the crew of the Enterprise have questions for them, there's one girl who they're with by the name of Vina takes Christopher Pike off to the side and he's whooshed away from Spock and the rest of the landing crew. And he turns up to be brought down to a set of tunnels that leads to the quote-unquote menagerie. These aliens called the Felosians have different species to see how they would react and to see how to see how their species reacts to certain situations. I thought that the design of the Felosians was very cool, and the story point of making them speak telepathically I thought was smart, and I thought it was clever. Many people who have reviewed this episode, I'm sure, I imagine that a lot of interviewers have brought up the thing of this episode being boring, too long, and just too intellectual. As a lifelong Star Trek fan, I will tell you that this story is really entertaining. It's really thought-provoking, but it does kind of drag, and it doesn't really have the Star Trek DNA that I'm used to. Because the way that Christopher Pike acts, particularly in one scene where he's just fed up and he basically attempts to choke one of the Felosians to death, to convince them to let him and Vina go and to let the Enterprise go, is very, very unlike Starfleet captains and the way that they interact with other races. Now, I know if you are screaming at your screen right now saying, Marcelo, this was Gene's first shot at Star Trek, and if I'm being honest, this first attempt was raw. A lot of things about this first attempt didn't work. Maybe he hadn't got the true pillars of Star Trek down yet. Maybe that will come in the Man Trap. But seeing this episode today, I, as a lifelong Star Trek fan, kind of didn't appreciate the way that Christopher Pike was violent towards the Felosians, and the way that every time that Vina tried to play along in one of the illusions that the Felosians put upon Christopher Pike, he was sort of like ignoring what she was saying, because she was the one that, she being the one that was there the longest, understood that if she didn't play along to a certain extent, the Felosians would punish her, which they did. But it was very, very odd to me that Jeffrey Hunter, he did a solid job in this, but I'm like, look, as much as I want to see the adventures of Christopher Pike and the crew of the Enterprise from this era, which I'm going to get in my modern times, and I'm very, very happy for that. But I don't know if I would have been down for an entire series of Star Trek led by Jeffrey Hunter as the captain, as Christopher Pike, because he kind of worked for me in this episode, but he really didn't. He really, really didn't. My favorite character in this episode, no surprise, is Major Barrett. I thought that she really did a solid job with what she was given. I didn't like the fact that she wasn't allowed to go down to the planet initially with the rest of the away team. I found it to be a bit odd and a bit weird. And the line that she was given was, "Oh, you're my most important partner, and I need you here back on the ship." That was a bunch of bullshit. I was like, just why didn't you let her go? Why didn't you let her go? But then again, that can be explained away by the thoughts of the time and this and that and whatever. I enjoyed this episode, but there were things about it that bugged me, because I feel that Star Trek really got its legs and really became the show that I love to watch when I talk about the next episode called The Man Trap. With William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk, DeForest Kelley as Bones, and with Leonard Nimoy as Spock. When they filmed the second pilot, The Man Trap, which was unheard of at the time, I think that Gene really got the formula down pat, and that's the iteration of the original series that I love the most, and not this. This really is a really interesting experiment, but I'm not really 100% sure if it really worked. I mean, this pilot got reused perfectly in an episode called the Menagerie later on in season 1. To great effect, I might add. That'll do it for my review of the first ever episode of Star Trek, the unaired pilot entitled The Cage, written by Gene Roddenberry and produced by Gene Roddenberry, as I might add. Alright guys, before I go, I just want to let you know that this new video series that I have on my channel is part of a collaboration with two other YouTube channels. One being Starfleet Boy After Dark, and the other one being Tex Trek. Now, 1 hour after this video goes live, I strongly suggest that you go over to youtube.com/TexTrek to get a live show about the latest and greatest Star Trek episode of that week. And a little while after that, I suggest that you go over to the channel Starfleet Boy After Dark for a live, late night, sort of fly on the wall, bartender kind of show talking about all of the latest and greatest nerd news of that particular week. And it's a wonderful, wonderful show. But I do want to say, if you tune into our Starfleet Boy After Dark show, it is sort of YouTube MA, if that's a thing. So it is very, very raw, unedited, and hold barred. So it is not for the faint at heart. But if you do like nerdy stuff and you don't care about language, I suggest you check out Starfleet Boy After Dark. My rating for this episode would be a C. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, as always, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.